Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View.
And good Sunday morning to you. Welcome to Capitol View. I'm Jay Burr. Well, this week we are highlighting the U.S. House District 4 race. And so we're going to start with the incumbent. That'll be Republican, Representative Bruce Westerman. Boss, we certainly do appreciate the time. Let's get right into things here. Healthcare, a lot of attention put on that, especially this year, especially with the pandemic and just in general. A lot of people we've asked about dismantling or just kind of tweaking the Affordable Care Act. I know you've introduced the Fair Care Act. I guess how does that differentiate from the ACA?
Well, good morning, Jay. Good to be with you. And, the Fair Care Act is something that I first introduced in 2019. We call it the Fair Care Act of 2019. And just recently, Senator Braun and I introduced the Fair Care Act of 2020 with a bill in the House and the Senate. So we've got a bicameral bill. And this started right after the Republican efforts to do the American Health Care Act, the one with the famous John McCain thumbs down. Right after that failed, I started working on this bill and worked about a year and a half putting it together. And I went into it with three objectives. The first one was to cover pre-existing conditions. The second one was to cover more people, and the third one was to lower costs. And not just lower costs to the federal government, but lower costs for what all Americans are paying for health care. My background is engineering, and this was kind of a reverse engineering exercise where we wanted these outcomes, and the challenge was to figure out how to get there. And I knew that healthcare really couldn't be a partisan issue. Democrats tried that with the ACA. They passed that on straight party lines, and it's not turned out to be very successful. Republicans couldn't even get the ACA passed. We got beat up on that in the 2018 midterms. So a bill that really addresses the healthcare issues needs to get the 60 vote or pass the 60 vote threshold in the Senate, which means it needs to be bipartisan. When we started looking into this, we found a lot of bipartisan solutions out there. Fair Care Act of 2020 has 75 bipartisan ideas in it, and it does do what we intended for it to do. It covers pre-existing conditions even better than the ACA. We literally lifted the language out of the ACA that covers pre-existing conditions, plus we added a guaranteed coverage pool into the Fair Care Act. Now, as far as repeal and replace, the way the Fair Care Act is written right now, it's just a bill to go in and fix the existing code. It would do away with some of the ACA, but it would keep other parts of it, like the pre-existing conditions, like the health insurance exchanges, which is a good market-based idea, and this whole bill is about market-based solutions. So we want to expand on those exchanges, make them larger, get more people into it. And one way to do that is take all the federal employees, who a lot of folks think they get a better insurance than the taxpayers do, and put them into the exchanges. Members of Congress, everybody that works for the federal government, they would get their health care through the exchanges. And, it's just a compilation of a lot of great bipartisan ideas. Should the Supreme Court strike down the ACA, then within a matter of weeks, we could take the language that we need to make this a replacement bill. But right now, we'd call it a repair bill or a major overhaul bill. But it's not a repeal and replace, although it could be should the Supreme Court strike it down.
You were kind of mentioning the marketplace, and we'll kind of switch gears here. The markets here in the U.S., doing well, soaring, some would even say, but that doesn't seem to necessarily translate into common folks. Job numbers are still down, bouncing back a little bit, but still down here. I guess what needs to be done to boost sort of the regular people's economy and be able to get them back to work?
Well, we're seeing regular people go back to work. We saw record unemployment before the pandemic, and I think we can get back to those records if we get people back to work, get schools opened up, get through the pandemic. We're very close to having a vaccine for the pandemic, but we've also got a lot more science and technology out there and medications, and we're able to deal with those cases and keep the death rate as low as possible. But it's about getting the economy back up and running. I commend the governor for not shutting down our economy here in Arkansas, and I believe our unemployment rate's ticking about 3 points ahead of the rest of or the average of the rest of the country. So the key thing is to get the economy moving again. And I think that's going to happen sooner than later. And the great GDP numbers we saw just this week, was it 33% growth in GDP. So the indicators are there that the economy is on the way back.
And I guess just quickly here, we've got about a minute left here. Tension across not just the country, but Arkansas. We've seen protests, some riots even break out here. But, in your position as one guy up there in a pool of 435, what do you want to try to do to bring about some of that racial injustice to be rectified, and even, some of the other issues that a lot of folks have been protesting about?
Yeah, well, I think it all starts with each individual and the way we conduct ourselves, and the way we see others, and the way we treat others. And I always say, one of the guiding principles in my office is to abide in love, that we treat people the way that we want to be treated. With that said, people have a right to protest. They have a right to assemble. They don't have a right to destroy other people's property or harm other people. The rioting and the looting and that sort of stuff, there shouldn't be any tolerance for that. But we should protect people's right to peacefully assemble and to protest. A lot of this started with the George Floyd incident, and it wasn't long after that Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina had a police reform bill. And it was supposedly a bipartisan bill until it came time to vote on it, and Chuck Schumer and his Democratic colleagues up there rejected Senator Scott's bill. So that's one of the things that we could do as Congress, is to really take a serious look at it and pass Senator Scott's bill.
Well, we will see how it goes, and we will also see how Election Day goes. We wish you nothing but the best of luck here, and we always appreciate the time, and hopefully we'll be able to do it again soon.
Well, always good to be with you, Jay, and the election's coming up soon. If you haven't voted, get out there and vote. Don't miss that opportunity.
Absolutely. All right, well, we appreciate you. Well, when we come back, we talk with the Democratic challenger, William Hanson. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
I'm French Hill, and I approve this message.
I'm Joyce Elliott, and you know what toughened me up for politics? Teenagers. I was a teacher for 30 years, and there is nothing French Hill can say about me that will get under my skin. But boy, is he trying. They make me sound downright scary, but my students will tell you, as long as you've done your homework, we're fine. But French Hill has not done his homework. I grew up poor in rural Arkansas. I support small business. I voted to fund police pensions, and I cut grocery taxes, and I will fight for the middle class that French Hill has forgotten. So when you hear my opponent say something nasty about me, remember why I worked with moody teenagers for 30 years. I believe in our future, and I approve this message because I know the best is yet to come.
A devastating crisis, small businesses closing and families struggling. But Congressman Hill took nearly $3 million from corporate special interests, then voted to hide details of a $500 billion corporate bailout. Worse, it allowed corporate CEOs to pocket taxpayer money as they laid off American workers. As many small businesses and workers are left without any relief at all. Congressman Hill's the worst of Washington. House Majority PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Airlift Concrete Experts is your go-to company for trouble with any settling concrete. We use a structural polyurethane that is injected beneath the structure to raise it back to a level state. And every job we do has a warranty. Call Mike at Airlift Concrete Experts.
Get ahead on your Christmas shopping at the Bella Ristina Modern Vintage Market, November 6th through 8th in Conway. Over 200 booths with vintage-inspired, and handmade decor inside the Conway Expo Center. Come shop Central Arkansas's original, locally owned, and largest vintage market event.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back into Capitol View. This week we're talking to the candidates hoping to win the seat for U.S. House District 4. And joining us now, Democrat challenger William Hanson. And boss, we certainly do appreciate the time. Let's get right to it here because our time is limited now. Health care, I know that's been a big thing amongst the pandemic and everything. So obviously that is at the top of a lot of the discussions here. Now, what do you think ought to be done with the Affordable Care Act going forward? Do you just want to see it kind of tweaked a little bit? Do you want to see it completely redone? Kind of what's your take?
Well, I think it needs to be fixed, not replaced. I'm on record as believing that health care, like education, is a right, not just a privilege. And here in Arkansas, I'm grateful that we had Medicaid expansion, because with the pandemic, with all the people losing their job, they also lost their insurance. And so they were able to sign up through the Affordable Care Act and they're insured. And it's something, to me, when you look at the public support for the Affordable Care Act, it's undeniable.
What specifically do you want to see tweaked? Because obviously, you know, you're in favor of this, but what are some of those things that really kind of just need to be cleaned up a little bit?
Well, the case before the court right now, it relates to the individual mandate. In other words, after the first case where the Supreme Court considered it constitutional and said it was a tax, President Trump zeroed it out, in other words. But I would like to see a public option go in. I would like to maintain the option for people to have private insurance as well, but I don't want to see anyone left out who can't afford private insurance. So I'm looking for them to do a public option. I support Vice President Biden's approach to this right now.
COVID-19 obviously had a huge impact economically in this country as well. You know, we've seen job losses across the country, but stocks are booming, so kind of an odd thing here. But getting back to just normal folks here, what do you propose to get people back to working? We've seen sort of the unemployment percentage steadily dropping, but still pretty high. So what do you think still needs to be done in that arena?
Well, first, I study political economy. Let's be clear that the stock market is not the economy. In other words, we keep talking about that. Not all of us own stocks in the stock market. We're talking about working men and women who have jobs, who need jobs. And here, even in the 4th District, the unemployment in Hot Springs and Pine Bluff, for instance, is double from what it was in March. So we lost a lot of jobs. I'm disappointed that we did not have the second COVID relief bill passed, because we need to keep pumping resources into the economy to keep people afloat and keep small businesses afloat as well. And I think that's important for us to be able to do that. During the Great Depression, in other words, we had to spin our way out of it, and we're going to have to spin our way out of this one as well. But I think the mistake that the administration made was not understanding that you need to fix the health care problem before you can fix the economic problem. One helps the other one. If you take care of the pandemic, people are able to go back to work safely. People are able to go back to school safely. They're able to open up their businesses. So we need to sort of tackle this pandemic, and I'm hoping that after November 3rd and then January 20th next year, we have President Biden, we can get back to the business of tackling this pandemic, and then we can begin to fix the economy. But we need a COVID relief bill to sort of paycheck protection funds as well to keep small businesses afloat, and people needed funds to pay rent, to pay their mortgages.
Now across the U.S. and even here in Arkansas, we've seen protests. In some places, we've seen things kind of break out into riots. I guess just from the racial injustice and just social issues, including race. How do you, as just one person in Congress, even begin to tackle those things? And I guess kind of what do you want to do to see some of these things rectified?
Well, first, when we talk about race relations, it's multifaceted, but we really are probably talking right now about criminal justice reform, and that's the tack that I would take. Here in Arkansas, we were the tip of the spear for that. After the Lane massacre in 1919, the first case that the Supreme Court dealt with racial disparities in the criminal justice system was an Arkansas case with Moore v. Dempsey, where it really tackled the procedural due process unfairness of that case that had about several black men on trial for murder after the Lane massacre. And we've done the work here in Arkansas. The University of Arkansas Little Rock's Bowen School of Law has done a great report on racial disparities in the criminal justice system. We have 15% of the population is African Americans, but we're 42% of the people who are in prison. So we have a mass incarceration problem here in Arkansas. The ACLU of Arkansas and the Bowen School of Law, they've already done the work. We just need the political will to begin to implement some of those things that will get us going. For most of my, not most of my career, but almost half of my career, I worked in and with law enforcement as an assistant attorney general, and also running a criminal justice program, teaching community policing and community relations. You have to start with building trust and legitimacy. And the way you do that, just in a couple of quick examples, is one, we need body cameras. We need body cameras, mandatory body cameras, so we can see what happens when we have all these serial shootings of black men in particular. Independent investigators. You can't have the DAs investigating the police. We need to have someone outside the system. You know, I've been in law enforcement, and we work, DAs work with police. That's like family, and you can't have that happen. You need an objective voice if you want to have the people believe the result that's going to come out. So those are just a couple of examples, and there are just many, like cash bail. There's a whole range of things we need to really look at.
Yeah, and I was going to say, what are some of those quick things here? But I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. And I guess just real quickly here, we got about a minute left here. Is there anything that you want to bring to the table when it comes to, because you kind of said we have to spend our way out of this pandemic, but is that a thing where, you just take on that debt regardless, or how do you find that balance between, handling some of the issues because of COVID, but also not just further spending the country into a hole?
Well, the first thing I would do is repeal the Trump tax cuts, in other words, which gave this big giveaway to most of his friends and corporations. Once we put that money back in the pot, in other words, it lessens the impact. But once you get the economy going again, it sort of takes care of itself. It's like a carburetor. You got to prime the pump. You got to keep it going. And once people are working, they're paying taxes, they're spending money, and we'll start recouping that, and we'll be able to sort of get back to full strength. And so it's one of those things that you have to do. In other words, it's like Kobe. When Kobe misses a shot, he didn't stop shooting. He kept shooting until he hit it.
That's it, man. Shooters shoot. Well, we appreciate you shooting your shot here with us. Again, Democrat candidate for U.S. Congressional District 4 here in Arkansas. We certainly do appreciate the time, boss, and we will do it again soon, hopefully.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being here with you.
Absolutely. All right, when we come back, we talk to Libertarian candidate Frank Gilbert. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
Joyce Elliott will never stop raising taxes. That is what she does. She's running for Congress to do it again. Elliott raised taxes on low and middle income families, making life harder. And still, she doesn't get it. Backing Biden's agenda, $4 trillion in higher taxes, digging a hole too deep to climb out. Dig and tax and spend. That's what liberals do, like Joyce Elliott. Congressional Leadership Fund is responsible for the content of this advertising.
I love shoes. You find them in the store, they call you, but they hurt. The best ones hurt the worst. And you're walking around going, I don't want anyone to know that I'm not happy. Stuck in the arch supports, and I felt so much better. I'd say Good Feet helped with all of my great shoes. They turned out to be something that actually works for me. My name is Ava, and that's my Good Feet story.
See for yourself with a free personalized arch support fitting at the Good Feet store.
Sold it, sold it, sold it.
Attention fishermen, outdoorsmen, developers, and pilots. Absolute Real Estate Auction in Murfreesboro, Arkansas. 142 acres with over a mile of Little Missouri River frontage. With a 3,100 square foot 5-bedroom lodge, 1,600 square foot guest home, 2 hangars, and a private airstrip. Offered in 2 tracks in its entirety. Selling regardless of price. Tuesday, December 8th at 11 a.m. Go to WilsonAuctioneers.com.
Sold it, sold it, sold it.
There are now more options than ever to enjoy tzatziki's. Our Mediterranean menu is full of healthy and original favorites that are available for dine-in, delivery, takeout, curbside, and drive-through at select locations. We've implemented safety procedures to protect both our guests and our crews. Order online at tzatziki's.com or download our app today. Thank you for your continued support.
I'm French Hill. It's been a tough year, but here in Arkansas, we're resilient, quick to bounce back, and hard to keep down. And nobody outworks us either. That's why when coronavirus hit, I went to work immediately to help bring $8 billion in relief for you, your family, and our small businesses. I'm French Hill, and I approve this message because while times are tough and there's still more to do, we'll get through it together, neighbor to neighbor, stronger and healthier than ever.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Welcome back to Capitol View. Again, we're talking with all three candidates from U.S. House District 4's race. And Libertarian Frank Gilbert joins us now. And boss, we hope you're doing well. Let's get right to it here. Healthcare, one of the big topics that has been brought up as a result of the pandemic. The Affordable Care Act at the center of that. What are your thoughts on the ACA? Is it something that should just be totally ripped apart, or do you just see some tweaking that needs to be involved there?
Oh, frankly, I'd love to see it just done away with, but I know that there are folks who currently need it or some of the provisions of it. So until we can do more permanent changes, obviously we have to do something with the ACA. But overall, health care is better in this country than it's ever been. The problem seems to be with politicians and insurance companies. And when those two get together and put their heads together, grab your wallet, run for the door if you can. But until we can separate politics and insurance from health care, I'm afraid we're stuck with some kind of jury-rigged mess, and I guess our current jury-rigged mess is the ACA.
You mentioned grabbing the wallet and running with it. The economy, also a big part of this pandemic, as many jobs have been lost. The economy's taken a dip, you know, at least for average Joes. Now Wall Street's been seen on the up and up. But what do you think, though, needs to be done to kind of help us average guys out here to get back to work, bring back some of those jobs that have been lost due to the pandemic?
Well, and we've seen the only bipartisan effort in the last 3.5 years, and that's in an effort to spend more money that we don't have, to lower taxes that, you know, or should be used to pay the debt that we've already run up. I think we need to take a deep breath, try to sort out what the panic and the pandemic both really are, and see if we can't get economics separated from that as well. We shut down in large parts of the country, Arkansas a little less so than some, but that shutdown had a terrible economic cost, and President Trump has talked about the cure can't be worse than the disease, and yet he's gone about making the cure worse than the disease, along with the help of the Democrats. And I'll be honest with you, if they had been honest with us in the beginning about what the epidemic was, we'd probably know a lot better what to do now. The truth is, they lied to us in the beginning. They didn't know things, and they said things about things that they were clueless about. And now it's hard to believe anything they say. I hope after this election is over with, the politicization of our pandemic may die down, and we may be able to figure out what really to do about the economy.
Another big thing that just has kind of popped up is just sort of all the racial tension here in the country. You know, we've seen peaceful protests, we've seen some riots break out. I guess, and this is something we asked Democrat challenger William Hanson, was, you know, as one person in Congress, you know, what can you try to bring to the table to bring about some of these reforms that this country believes it needs?
I would hope that a third way, a third option, a third voice would help. There are things that the Democrats and the Republicans could do if they would, but they don't want to advantage the other party, even to do well by the country as a whole. And I would love to be in the middle, trying to find those on both sides who could come together and do things that will help the country, regardless of how it impacts their party. Frankly, that's a pretty distant hope as well, because the Democrats and Republicans for 160 years have run this country, and they have perfected the ways to benefit themselves at the expense of the country, and that seems to be what they're continuing to do.
This is something we've asked some of your other libertarian counterparts who are also running for office, but you know, if any of you guys actually win, you guys are going to be just sort of the lone wolves up there as parts of, you know, the heavily Republican, heavily Democrat chambers up there in Congress. But I guess, too, if you are elected, you know, what do you do as a libertarian? How do you kind of wade through those waters?
Well, the truth of the matter is I find myself agreeing with both parties in large. The Democrats have parts of their program about individual liberty and individual rights that I can get with. The Republicans have a little more sanity when it comes to economics than do their Democrat counterparts, and I can work with them in those areas. The truth is, one man doesn't make a lot of difference among 435. Especially when the 435 have been separated into warring camps for decades now and are fighting each other rather than seeking the interest of the country. What it could do, if you get a libertarian or two elected, it might show the Democrats and the Republicans, you know what, this scam we're running isn't working as well as it used to, and maybe we could get them to work for the American people instead of their parties.
Well, we tell you here, it'll be fun to watch it unfold if that does become the case. Libertarian candidate for U.S. House District 4, Frank Gilbert. Boss, we appreciate the time, and we'll do it again if you win.
Good.
All right. And we are back to wrap it up after this. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
French Hill forgot where he came from when he voted to keep the COVID relief package details a secret. Because big corporations got help first, while Arkansas businesses were left to fight for themselves, firing people and shutting down. And he forgot again when he voted to raise our taxes, but cut them for corporations and the 1%. And since he's forgotten about us, it's time we forget about him. Women Vote is responsible for the content of this ad. A devastating crisis, small businesses closing and families struggling. But Congressman Hill took nearly $3 million from corporate special interests, then voted to hide details of a $500 billion corporate bailout. Worse, it allowed corporate CEOs to pocket taxpayer money as they laid off American workers. As many small businesses and workers are left without any relief at all. Congressman Hill's the worst of Washington. House Majority PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And that is it for today's show. We're back out with an all-new one next week. Get the Capitol View podcast. You see it right there wherever you do get your podcasts. Make sure you get out and vote. Also, make sure you tune in. KRK4 come Tuesday night. We'll have all your election coverage from all the races and all the ballot issues coming up on Tuesday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.